Good afternoon. My name is Khang N, and I'm here to talk about social media and the mental influence of adolescence. The question I'll be addressing is, to what extent does the role of social media play in adolescents with mental disorders, including depression and anxiety? Now, before we get to my main statement, I would like to explain these mental disorders in detail. With anxiety, it's pretty much normal to have. You can be nervous, or a little bit nervous, or have a little bit of fear for something. However, being too much anxious results in having a detrimental mental health, meaning that your mental health will worsen. In addition, having too much anxiety can result to depression, and many symptoms of depression include having a loss of interest to many activities you liked in the past, and having a sad and gloomy mood. We must also talk about the sharing of ideas. Now, I would like to think of that topic as a double-edged sword. You have the good side, being able to collaborate with other people and share content throughout the whole world. However, if viewing that same content in a different way, it can deprive the quality of life and prove to have harmful mental effects. But as Edward Kessler said from Social Media and the Movement of Ideas, the impact that it has depends on the person that uses it and how it's used. Now, with the background information that was given, I can state that social media can negatively influence the behavior of adolescents, but there are other factors that can provide beneficial effects. Now, let's look at these negative effects, shall we? Now, social media does have an impact on mental health. One of these impacts is personal connections. As we see here, this man is sitting alone in the desert. Now, this can connect to an adolescent that's on their phone all the time without noticing their surroundings in the real world. This is a prime example of social isolation, as one person that is completely isolated from their whole connections, whether it's family, friends, or other acquaintances, and they only focus on themselves as a result. And another impact to mental health is sleep. If you look at your phone, or if you look at that huge bright blue screen at night, this can deprive your quality of sleep, and you will most likely not sleep until an hour later. In addition, we have the fear of missing out, which is if an adolescent goes on their phone all the time because a new notification popped out, and they're afraid that they will miss out on that new such content. And to expand on my point of fear of missing out, we can look at this graph right here. So in 2012, 34% of teenagers use social media more than once a day. However, 6 years later, in 2018, it skyrocketed up to 70%, with 16% of these almost constantly use social media more than once a day. And we could see this with the other four: once a day, several times a week, once a week, and less than weekly. In 2012, their percentages were more in the mid-10s, but as later on, as time passed by to 2018, we could see that the percentages drastically decreased down to lower than 4%. Now, how does social media impact adolescents with anxiety? Well, whenever adolescents are posting content they're afraid that other peers would give them hates, or they don't like it, or it's really bad. And as a result, this kind of emotional fear and built up stress will make them have unethical decisions in the future. Now, what about depression? How does social media impact adolescents with depression? Well, there's actually a causal link according to a study from the Journal of Clinical and Social Psychology. Whenever you're looking at certain content that causes enviness, jealousy, or anger within people, this can toll on the state of well-being and actually decrease your self-esteem. And having a low self-esteem can lead to many outcomes, mainly suicide. Now, like there's a yin and a yang, there has to be a negative effect and positive effects. So let's look at some positive effects. As you see here on this picture, there's a lot of share clouds on here, and that represents the benefit of international sharing. Companies can share content for teenagers to respond and give feedback to. Jay McGonigal, a game designer at Institute for the Future, created 3 games along with her team that are based off real world situations. These people can play these games and make them figure out like the strategies to use them in case if there was a real world situation. And based on the gameplay data that was given to them, the Institute can research the plausible connections or the strategies used in case if there was a real world situation. In addition, another benefit that teens use for social media is to expand connections. As long as the adolescents are using social media for an educational manner, they can find leaders that can help them along the way into their future career, or maybe school in general, or having etiquette in the real world. Now, what happens if your negative effects are overwhelming the positive effects? Well, fortunately, there are some methods to solve these. One method is to use self-control. Basically, adolescents should put away their social media accounts, just live life to the fullest outside and be active. Now, doing an activity actually releases stress and causes dopamine to flow around and give adolescents a happy feeling, which will discard all that negative emotions. In addition, we have therapy, which allows adolescents to plan their recovery. So if they have depression, then that means they can make a plan on the steps on how to relieve themselves from being depression free. Now, even with these solutions, there is one limitation in this, and that is relapse. Relapse is when a condition returns out of recovery. So like when you think that you're almost out of depression, but it suddenly hits you back in. Now, many adolescents will think that this will be a failure or they wasted their time with that procedure. However, this is not the case, as relapse is not a failure. It's more of a reflection process. They need to figure out, they have new strategies to just cure themselves and bounce back right into recovery. So overall, the role that social media has in society does impact the new generations. They are able to balance out their usage of social media and their real world selves. And if the social media overtakes them, then that means they must find the method of recovering back into their regular state. Thank you. What questions do you have?
Thank you, Khang. I do have two questions for you.
All right.
First up, how did your research question evolve as you moved through the entire process?
So at first, I was only focusing on how the role social media plays with adolescents. But later on, when I evaluated, I realized that social media does play a role in the mental behavior of teenagers. So I added the extra bit of how mental disorders are affected by social media as well. And I chose anxiety and depression because they are most commonly found in teenagers, and they can succumb to them.
Next question. What advice would you have for other researchers that want to do something on this topic?
Social media is a highly debatable topic, and and you gotta do your research. When I mentioned back then how there's a positive and negative, make sure you, like many people will focus on the negatives, but make sure you also focus on the positive effects, because even if there's a little positive, having that positive can go a long way in the future of social media.
You are done, my friend.